Anderson. I'm a disciple making movement trainer and coach, and I'm excited about sharing with you today from my experience. I don't have all the answers, that's for sure, but I have probably faced most of the issues that you face as a disciple maker myself in the last 30 years that I've been doing this, or I've coached somebody who's faced a similar issue. So if you have a question that you need help with, that is what this live Q&A I do on Fridays is all about. I see Dana there. Good to see you, Dana. And Allie Smith has joined as well. Good to see you. And again, if you have a particular question, Dana, I got your question. I'm definitely going to be answering that and talking about that today. But yeah, let me know where you're coming in from. We've got some people coming onto some of the other channels also. But I'm going to dive right in and get started. 2 weeks ago, I was talking about how to sustain a movement. So you work really hard, pray really hard to see a movement begin. And what we want to see is a movement not just reach, say, 4th generation growth and 500 or 1,000 baptized believers. We want that movement to continue to grow and spread and sweep through our region as tens of thousands of people come to know Jesus. But the sad news, and I'm just going to tell you up front, is that not all movements continue. Some movements start and then they plateau or they die. And so I want you guys to upfront be aware of these, what we call death factors for movements, things that can kill a movement, can stop a movement from moving forward. And I don't have time to do a whole teaching on this, but I just want to highlight a few things that you can be careful about as you are starting your movement and working on seeing multiplication happen in your area, so that you have the right DNA and you avoid these dangers from the beginning. Whether you're planning your first house church, your first disciple making group, or whether you already have 3rd generation, 4th, or 5th generation, this is really applicable to you. So the number one in my mind of why most movements die is the injection of outside funds, right? One of the characteristics of disciple making movements is that they are indigenous. That means they are of the local people. They have local leadership, people who are from that area, people who are from that culture. They have local culture and music and things that they use are of the local people, the local culture. And they use local resources, local money. It is a huge temptation. Believe me, I have faced this temptation. I've given into it. I've made this mistake sometimes. To inject outside money, because when exciting things happening like what we're seeing in Asia, just today I got a couple of pictures from one of our trainees in a restricted access or an unreached place in Asia, and he sent pictures of baptizing people. Exciting things are happening and people want to invest, people want to help. But sometimes the money that we invest from the outside, not sometimes, usually, let's use the word usually, that money comes into the movement and actually destroys that local sense of ownership in the movement. And the local people stop giving. They start looking outside for assistance. The motivation and drive to reach their own people with their own resources is diminished, and tendency sets in. So if you're an outsider working with a movement, let's say that you're a foreigner, maybe you're a Nigerian working country in West Africa, or you're a Westerner who's working in Asia, you need to be extremely careful. Err on the side of doing too little. I would just tell you that as far as bringing in any outside funding into the movement. Instead of this, you want to teach and train the local people to give for the work of evangelism, for the work that is needed, even the work of community development in their own region. Because I've seen it time and time and again. I could give you hundreds of case studies of movements that were started. They looked like they were going to take off, and then They started paying outside, they started paying people in the movement to do the work of the ministry, or they bought a bunch of motorcycles for people. And then the other people didn't want to go for evangelism because they didn't get motorcycles or whatever. So be very careful of outside funding coming into a movement. Instead, teach the local people to give. So important. Okay, one more that I want to mention is a reason why movements stall. And you get some initial movement taking place, some initial organic growth. You're starting to see the multiplication, but they stall because the leaders do not focus on leadership development. So as we are multiplying disciples and as we are multiplying groups, we also need to multiply leaders, right? And how do we multiply leaders? Leaders multiply leaders, right? Disciples make disciples, leaders train leaders. And so we need to take time to really have a strategy for leadership development as our movement grows so that it won't stall. And one more reason I wanted to just mention is over dependence on the apostolic leader. And too much control also from the apostolic leader can kill a movement. Initially, you're getting traction. They're starting to go. That apostolic charismatic leader is driving the movement forward with their exhortation and inspiration and faith. But there's an over dependence on that one apostolic leader, and we don't see leadership passed on, authority, responsibility passed on to the other leaders that are being developed in the movement. That too can really limit a movement's growth, and it can stall out because of that. So those are just some things. We talk more about this in the Moving Forward in Disciple Making Movements course that we offer. I know Dana took that course. I know there's her watching who probably took that course, but we have a new cohort coming up in November. And if you haven't yet registered for that course to take our second level DMM course, I'd really encourage you to do that. There's something that we have in that course on what is necessary to sustain a movement. So I wanted to mention that. Let me greet a couple of you who've come on. I see Deepak and Nick and Purpose to Function. I'm not sure who that is. Arthur, a bunch of you joining on Instagram. Great to see you guys. And we've got Taj joining. Where are you coming in from, Taj? Bishnu. We have George from Ghana. Great to see you today. Welcome on the call today. And if you've got an issue you want me to talk about, please go ahead and put that in the chat, and I would love to comment on that and give you a little bit of input from my experience. But let me go ahead and move on to another question that came up. And this one is from Dana, who I know is there watching. And she said, here, let me just read the question. She said, I've been wondering if when we invite people locally to do a DMM or a DBS study, would we have more success if we asked them to host it? I really like to invite people to our own home, but it seems like whatever we start doing, they do model off of that and they don't see themselves as able to. Okay, so they're not able to do what you're modeling. And yeah, they want the leaders whose home they've been invited into to keep doing it. So you're struggling with getting them to see that they can do it, and you're wondering if shifting to their homes or start right in their homes could be a way to see greater multiplication. Just saying, this is an excellent and a really important one, and there is no like magic answer to this. There's no formula, but I think the principle that we've seen work in many places around the world is, yes, it is probably better whenever possible that you form a new group in their case. Okay, and when you meet somebody who's a potential person of peace, and you're asking them, do you have some friends who would like to join in this and study scripture together, or join you in hearing these stories from the Bible? Do you have any friends you'd like to invite? And do you have a suggestion of a place where we could meet? I think it creates that sense of this is theirs, not yours, and can more quickly hand off to them. I just read something this morning about if you model something more than 2 times and then you don't give it to them, you over model, it does create dependency. And I would agree with that. It's a, it depends on the particular people, it depends on the context, but as quickly as you possibly can, you want to let them start to do it, let them start to lead it, let them start to take responsibility for that, and do it in their own space with their people rather than with your people. A lot of times what happens is we share the gospel with someone, they seem interested, and we invite them into our existing house church group or into our existing discovery group. Hey, we're meeting on Thursdays, want to join us at my house? And in a sense, it's okay because you are like a person of peace and you're inviting them to come in. But if you're looking to start new groups rapidly through those new people, you do want to do it in their space. So if you met them in the grocery store, you met them in your hair salon, as is your case, Dana, then say, hey, could we meet somewhere? Do you have a suggestion of where we could get together? And do you have anyone else that you'd like to bring along? And get it into their space. And then they will be, if it's with their oikos, they'll be kind of the natural leader of that. And you always work through them. And as soon as, maybe you're going to model with them the day before, make sure they know what they're doing, and then they lead it. And you might go just to watch and then debrief the next time with them. But of course, it depends a bit on the context and the people. So I'm not sure. Dana, let me know. Did I answer your question? Is that helpful input? Do you have a follow-up question on that? Feel free and let me know about that. For others who are listening, what do you guys think? Have you experienced this kind of issue as well, where you bring people into your own home and it's hard to get them to feel confident that they can do what you're doing? If you have, give me a thumbs up. Let me know what your situation is with that. And one last comment that I would just make, which I think is really relevant and similar to the question you ask, is everything we do needs to be reproducible. And I know you know that, but what do I mean by that for others who are watching? It means that we purposely and intentionally simplify what we do so that it is not too heavy for the people that we are training. Let me just give an example of that again. Prayer. Right? For some of you, you've been Christians for many years. You have amazing prayer lives. And when you pray at the beginning of that discovery group, you pray with zeal. George, I'm thinking of you. You have such a prayer life. You can pray for many, many hours. And you've developed yourself as a man of prayer. And that is wonderful. But a new believer or a new seeker is definitely not going to be able to do what you do. And so you intentionally want to pray lightweight prayers, okay? Not that they're not powerful, but you want to simplify your language and simplify even the length of the prayer. Make it simple, make it easy so that it feels doable to those people. If we make things too complex and we make them too heavy, they will feel intimidated and like they can't do that. And so everything you do in that group, it needs to be genuine, authentic, and real, but it also needs to be light, right? So intentionally lighten the way that you're doing things so those new people can begin to do it. Sometimes people also want to practice before they actually do something. So I think meeting with people ahead of time, I'm going to lead a group for the first time, meet with them, have them share this, go through things with them, and then be there with them to help them their first time. And, you can step in and assist a little bit if you need to. It's that model, assist, watch, and leave model or launch model. And Dana, glad that was helpful. Tradition is hard to see past. I want to be hospitable, but I really want others to see they're able to do this. Absolutely. And they are. And yes, it's wonderful. The gift of hospitality is one of the characteristics of elders and leaders that, Paul talked about when he wrote about it in the book of Timothy. So continue to use that, but maybe be hospitable to have them over what they're going to do when they host this group in their context, rather than having the group actually hosted. So again, no formulas on this, but just some info today. Abdullah, where are you coming in from? Abdullah says, thanks for inviting us in this question and answer. My question is, why do we fail in our group making and organization? Okay. Can you tell me a little bit more about your group and what you're doing? And even what do you think might be some of the issues that might be causing problems? Are you sharing the gospel with people, but you're having trouble forming those groups? I just need a little bit more information from you to be able to respond to that. So while you're doing that, let me jump to another question. This is another question that came in from BJ. Again, one of our trainees who's done the Getting Started Disciple Making Movement course. And I'm just going to, for those of you who haven't done that course, you can go to ymfm.com to see the courses that we offer and click on the icon that says Getting Started in Disciple Making Movements. Get more information about our courses offer, which many of you who are listening and on the call today have taken those courses. So BJ, who's one of those trainees, he says, one question arises in my mind, ma'am. Here, if we find some believers from other churches and try to make disciples, then should we have to ask their pastor? Because if we don't ask and later they grow in faith and become a disciple maker, then their pastor may accuse us as thieves and church dividers. Such incidents happening in India. So excellent question, BJ. If you are training and making disciples of someone who is a member of another church, do you need to ask the pastor's permission before you enter in that discipling training relationship with them? And again, this is a little bit textual. Some parts of the world, this is a bigger issue than others. For example, Americans are very independent, and you may get some of that accusation, but it's going to be a lot stronger in a more hierarchical culture and context like India or like Nepal than it would be in the US. But just say that, first off, more effective than training existing church members who attend other churches is to make disciples and train new believers. Those who you lead to faith, those who come to the Lord yourself. As you train them, you're going to see greater fruitfulness and more effectiveness. In the beginning, it can be a slower beginning, a slower start. As you're sowing those gospel seeds and you're looking for those persons of peace among the lost, right? They are out there. Those persons who are going to be apostles to start new movements, they are out there and they're waiting to hear the gospel. So my first input, BJ, is that I would not focus my efforts on training people who already are members of other churches. But occasionally it does happen that people will come to you and want input and want disciple making from you and to learn from you and what you're doing. So I do think it's good to communicate with the pastor. What I would actually do instead of me going to the pastor to let them know about this is I would encourage them to first share with their pastor what they're doing, so that from the beginning, the initiative is coming from them, not coming from me. And that also is going to discourage the pastor from thinking that it's you trying to pull their person away. So talk to the person, say, I'd love to train you, but I'd really like if your pastor, understood more what we're doing. And if he gave the green light and he said, yes, it'll be fine if you want to do that. Let them talk to their pastor, and then after that, maybe have a conversation with their pastor and say, this is what we're doing. This is what this is all about. It's kind of non-traditional. Are you okay with them attending and being part of this? And get their blessing. I often say, you don't need to ask permission. It is good to ask for blessing, and it is good to communicate so that you're above board in what you're doing. If you're going to train people from other churches who have other sort of places where they're accountable for their growth and that kind of thing. Having said all that, there will be accusations. It'll be that, or it'll be something else. As you start to see them take off, BJ, some pastors are not going to like what you're doing, and there will be accusations that come against you. What is most important is that you did your due diligence. You did your part to communicate. You know that you didn't try to pull them out, that was from their own initiative, and you did everything you could to communicate. But again, focus on the lost and you won't have that problem. And it's a lost who Jesus focused on, right? He said the Son of Man came to seek and save the lost. He didn't worry trying to convince the Pharisees. Some Pharisees did Jesus followers, and he did change, but he didn't focus on the Pharisees. He didn't focus on changing their mindsets very much, right? He focused on lost people, and that's where he made disciples the most. And so what Jesus did, I think you're going to see more fruit and less trouble in that way. So I hope that gives you a little bit of help, BJ. Yeah. Any other questions related to that? What do you guys think? Give me some feedback. Those of you who are watching, what do you think of what I've shared? Any comments or insights you might have into this issue? I would welcome that. Go ahead and type those into that if you would. Okay, I have a question from, let's see, Paul David in Ibadan, Nigeria. And he's asking about, do we have any case studies of a DMM happening on a university campus? I think it's a university campus. He says, do you have a DMM case to learn from campus-based DMMs? Let me just say that I didn't have a lot of time to research this and look for this. So I did do a little initial research, and I know I've heard of some movements that have started on university campuses. But I couldn't get the specifics for you, Paul David, but I did want to just share a story to encourage you about my own daughter, Stephanie. So our daughter, Stephanie, grew up in Nepal and India, and then she did her high school in Thailand. And when it was time for her to go to university, she really wanted to attend a university campus in the United States where there were lost people. She didn't want to go to a Christian university and be with a bunch of Christians because she wanted to make a difference. Somehow that had come through, and she had caught that from us. And so she went to the University of Minnesota, and she began to share her faith with people around her. She was part of a group called InterVarsity, which is a campus ministry. And they had wonderful training and teaching and encouragement for the young people there. And so Stephanie started sharing Jesus with people in her dorm, right? She lived in a university dorm. She started sharing the gospel with people, and some of them responded and just they wanted to learn more. And so Stephanie and her roommate, they started these groups of disciples on the university campus right there in the dorm. And then some of those people who started attending those groups, Stephanie and her roommate and others, began to train them and teach them how to be disciples and how they could share their faith with others. And then new groups began in other dorms and other places, and those groups began to multiply. And some of those people that my daughter Stephanie led to the Lord are now InterVarsity leaders and staff who are on campuses in other parts of the U.S., and they are now training disciples and multiplying groups on those campuses. So I just want to say that it definitely can happen. And the issue that happens with students is they grow up and they leave the campus. So what I think is it's really a wonderful place to create a model for them of disciple making. But it's also really important that you train them right from the beginning that when you leave this campus, You can start groups as you're an engineer. You can start groups as you go and you work in the city that you're from. You can start doctors and nurses in the hospital you're going to work in. And so that it goes beyond student ministry. Often what happens is when people leave the campus, they become a good church attender, but they stop being a disciple maker like they were on their campus. So I would just say that's one of the concerns that I have with campus ministry, is that we train people to be disciple makers, not just churchgoers after they leave the campus, and make sure that they understand that that's the vision. We're training you so that when you graduate, you can go and start a movement in your city, and you will train and multiply disciples who aren't students as you continue to grow. So I hope that helps a little bit, Paul David. Believing with you for a movement among students there in Ibadan and many, many campuses across Nigeria. I know we have other trainees like Solomon and Adebayo, who I just taught in one of their conferences, and they are working on high school and college campuses. But just remember, these people do grow up, and you want to, from the beginning, make sure that they carry that model forward into their adult lives. All right, Dana asked a question: can we share the DMM material with a group without them purchasing it? As far as the videos, the answer is you can show it to them, but you can't share it with them. Feel free to show it to them, invite them over, or show it to them your phone or your computer, in their house. But as far as actually turning the videos to them, we discourage that. But any of the PDFs, you're very free to share. Any of the blogs, any of the other materials, the downloads, absolutely free to share those. And we encourage that, actually. So feel free to share away. And if you have a specific question, Dana, just write to me. I'm usually very generous, so probably I'm going to say yes. But we do try to protect our material a little bit, because we want people to take the course who are interested, have the community and coaching and all the other elements of the course. Bute, see you from Carnplay, Nimba, Liberia. Wonderful. I know I was just WhatsApping with you, and so good to have you on the call, Bute. We would love to see a movement take off in Liberia. And if you have any particular questions, please go ahead and pop those in. Jay Chetri, good to see you. And Jeffrey from Nigeria, Olusina Jeffrey. Ngum, where are you coming in from, brother? Ngum? Let me know again if you have any particular questions. Wow, our half hour has gone by really quickly. Let's see if I can sneak in one more question here today. We have a question from Stella. She asked, maybe I can two more. There's two more that I really want to answer. We may go a little longer than our half hour today, but Stella asked, she says, I'm wondering how best to share the gospel in an international school where many religions are represented without being overly assertive or considered a fanatic. So, Stella, I would just say what a wonderful opportunity you have to work with international students in a school who are coming from Hindu, Buddhist, Muslim backgrounds. And how can you share with these students as a teacher in the school? Well, I know that different countries have different laws about that, and what you can actually share in a classroom context is probably different from what you can share one-on-one. But I would just say that, again, the most natural way to share is to share your story. Share something that God did in your life with them in a private manner, probably not up front in the class, but meeting them outside the class or after school hours. It's okay. Share what God has done in your life. Share a story of how you encountered Jesus and what he's done, or your personal story, your testimony with them. And then see if they're interested to learn from God's word. And, you can start an after-school Discovery Bible study with students who are interested. Tell stories from the Word of God. Even in the classroom, you can tell a Bible story and just don't say that it's from the Bible. And then say, if you have questions after class about this story, or you'd like to hear other similar stories, that have really impacted my life and influenced who I am as a person, come talk to me after class and we can talk about that. But don't be afraid to share the stories and scripture that have influenced you from your personal experience. And often one of the questions I'll ask people when I'm starting a spiritual conversation is, what book or what author has influenced you the most in your life? And listen to them and what they say, and then say, I have to be honest and say the book that has influenced me more than any other is the Bible. And it's just amazing the truth that's in that book that has changed how I live. Would you like to hear more about that, or something like that, so that you're in a natural way sharing with people? All right, moving on to the next question. Steve Tengbei asked, why did Jesus take only men to be his disciples without women? Okay, great question. I'm glad you asked that. And I would just say he didn't. There's strong evidence that Jesus also had women who were a part of his group of disciples. Now, they aren't mentioned in the Bible, and that has to do with the culture of that time. They're not mentioned as the 12. But we see that he had women who traveled and who supported him, and his sponsors, those who have supported him, were people like Mary Magdalene. We see Jesus interacting with women a lot in scripture, and they became his followers. But it was the culture of the time to name the men and not name the women. It was also the responsibilities of the women to be able to leave their family and travel with Jesus were, often a hindrance from that. But Jesus, in his context, which in the Jewish context, women were, right on the level of a dog as far as status, very derogatory culture towards women at that time. And Jesus elevated women, and he acknowledged women, and he talked to women, and he called them to be his disciples. So we do see that Jesus discipled women, and he talked to women, and he raised them up and invested in them. And he also encouraged the men that were there to share with their wives and to them. So I don't have time, our time finished, but there's a lot more that I could say about that. I'd encourage you, Steve, to go to my blog, DMMs, frontiermissions.com/blog. And in the search bar, type women. And I have 3 or 4 or 5 articles about women and women in disciple making. And even, I think I might have one about Jesus and the disciples who were women. So you can go there and check that out and get more information. And that is a great resource for those of you. If you have a question that I haven't answered, or I don't have time to answer, or you want to find out more about baptism, or you want to find out more about how to do tithing in a church, or a house church, or any of those things, just go to that blog and type into the search bar. I have hundreds of articles there that could likely be of help to you. Well, our time is finished. We went 34 minutes today, but I think we had a good session. It was wonderful to see you guys. Keep sending in those questions, and I will be back here again next week at the same time. This will be my last in Missouri. We're going back to our home in Minnesota, so I'll be coming in live from Minnesota next Friday at the same time. God bless you guys. Keep going out and making disciples. We're almost done with our So Find Start Challenge for September. So we have 7 more days, 1 more week to finish that off. Let's finish strong, sharing the gospel, sowing a gospel seed every single day, finding persons of peace, and starting new groups. And if you start a new group this month, let us know about it. There's already groups that have started in Asia. We've heard about groups in Angola that have started this month, groups in Burma and different parts of the world, Myanmar. And God is at work, and he's going to work through you. God bless you guys. Have a wonderful week. Good weekend as well. Bye-bye.